Hello, I come to you with a bit of a weird video, but it's something I've been thinking about. Well, it's a collection of things that I've been thinking about for a long time, and I just never really knew a place to put them. And I decided, fuck it, just make a dedicated video about it because I feel like it's worth acknowledging, and that is that there are some weird inconsistencies in how PC Cast talks about her work, her like the writing and publication of different books, and just various things around her career. Some of these are very small and like not really that big of a deal. But I want to include them for the sake of helping build a picture. I also want to note that this is not exhaustive. These are the examples that I could think of while I was eating breakfast this morning and just like jotted down in a notebook. I will probably, when I'm working on like editing and stuff, I'll go back in and I'll find screenshots because I know I have screenshots of a lot of these things. And I'll take those screenshots and like insert them into the video so that you can like see what I'm talking about. I may also see about grabbing clips from certain like interviews and like discussions that she's done. Yeah, some of these things are like small and trivial, and under ordinary circumstances I wouldn't really care, but the way it all builds together paints an interesting picture, and I just think it's worth acknowledging and discussing, especially in light of the fact that PCcast is currently on, or recently has been on, a like promotional push for the upcoming House of Night movies, and also there's a re-release of the original House of Night novels. We'll get to that. And she has recently talked about in an interview that they are shopping around some like spin-off and continuation materials of the House of Night series. So PCcast has a very vested interest in promoting the House of Night, and especially promoting the House of Night in a way that will be palatable to a 2026, 2027, 2028 audience. And I think that's relevant in terms of some of the things that have been said. First, I just want to give a really weird one because I think this sets an interesting tone for how PCcast conducts herself. And again, I'm going to try and find a screenshot of this. I can't remember if it was on Goodreads in a question to the author or on Facebook in a question to the author, but someone sent some kind of message to PCcast, like a public message to PCcast, asking some kind of question about what was going to happen in a series, and explaining that like she has cancer and doesn't know if she will live before whatever is released. PCcast responded by saying, all caps, "You will not die," which is just an interesting choice. This fan says, "I better not die from breast cancer before I get to finish the Otherworld series. I love the House of Night series." PCcast responds, "You will not die. The Otherworld series is here for you." For some added context, I don't know how much it shows up on camera, but I've got a scar on my throat here because when I was 19, I had cancer. It was very early stage cancer. I was fine. But there was a long process of trying to figure out what the growth on my thyroid was. Is it benign? Is it malignant? Do we urgently need to remove it? What's the best treatment look like? It was a whole process. If my experience with cancer had gone slightly differently and I had actually been in a position, because my actual experience was that my biopsies were inconclusive, so I didn't know it was cancerous until it was removed, because that was the only point where the doctors could actually get a proper look at what the inside of the growth looked like and what kind of cells were in there. But if my process had gone differently and I had some kind of test that revealed it was cancer, and I was in this limbo period of knowing I had cancer and not knowing how aggressive it was and not knowing like what my prospects were, like if I was in any period like that and I was confiding in someone about, maybe being worried about like, am I going to live to see whatever, if that person responded by saying, "You will not die," I wouldn't feel comforted. I would feel fucking pissed off. Like, who the fuck do you think you are? You don't get to decide that. I wanted to start out with that to set the tone of like, PCcast will say and do very weird and intense and even like aggressively, I don't know, like, I don't know how to phrase the way it comes off, because I don't think she has a god complex. I don't think it's that, but it's almost this sense of like she I don't know how to phrase it. I'm sure hearing that you have your own sense of how fucking strange that is. Anyways, moving forward, we're going to get to stuff that's actually related to her writing. Another big one is Kristen Cast and her involvement in the House of Night series. Kristen Cast is officially listed as a co-author of the House of Night series. This is a thing that I have talked about in many places, and it still annoys me. Kristen Cast did not write any House of Night book. None of them. Not the original books, not the novellas, not the Otherworld books. She has not been a co-author of the House of Night series, but she is officially listed as a co-author of the House of Night series. And while PC Cast is more consistent about like when asked about the writing process with her daughter, she will say, oh, well, in the House of Night series, we didn't co-author, she was an editor. Just the fact that Kristen was ever listed as a co-author and any instance of PC Cast not flagging that as untrue is strange. And like, I know when these books were being released, like at the time that PC Cast started publishing the House of Night series, she didn't have the like clout or wealth to be really meaningfully accused of nepotism. But now she certainly, like, it certainly comes across as nepotism because like she's an incredibly successful author. Her daughter keeps getting books published, even though like I've looked at the ratings, they're not doing well. Like a lot of her books are under a 3.5 on Goodreads, which is like not good. I've seen some of her books dip below a 3, which is not good, but she still keeps getting publishing contracts. She's currently on a 4-book publishing contract, which is wild. That's very hard to get. But officially, she's credited as an author on this wildly successful book series that sold 240 million copies. So of course she has clout to back up her writing. Please bear with me trying to read this document. It has typos. PC. When we first started writing together, I would write and, chapter, send it to her, then she'd rewrite and send it back to me. We're on our 4th book now, and our system is much smoother. We discuss plots, conflicts, characters, etc., and then I write a draft of the book and send it to Kristen. She rewrites and sends it back to me. Sometime, I call her in earlier and have her read sections and we discuss. Also, I often leave blanks in Zoe's internal dialogue and Kristen fills them in for me. For PC, is it easier or harder to collaborate with someone as close to you as your daughter? PC, I've only had limited experience collaborating with another author. Gina Showalter and I have done some writing together, which was a very enjoyable experience. But I'd say it's much easier than I think an outsider would imagine. Kristen and I have always been very close, and we're used to being honest with each other. Plus, I can beat her, which is a definite plus. I just wanted to include that last part because, girl, what the fuck?
And Kristen it was her first semester of college. She was 19. And so she was out in the other part of our condo, probably watching TV, MTV back then, probably. And I would yell at her, and I call her Chicken because her initials are KFC. I'd be Chicken Francis. I would ask her, is this the right word for this? And she'd say, oh, Phyllis. And she calls me Phyllis. That's what P stands for, the PC. And she'd correct my word. And after a few times of doing that, I ask her if she would like to co-author the series with Mama.
Another oddity attached to that, it's not a lie, but it's just strange and it's like a weird lack of clarity. When PC Cast talks about Kristen as an editor of the House of Night series, she calls her a teen voice editor, which sure, that's basically like not quite a sensitivity reader, but like it's in line with that of like you're just making sure the writing around a certain demographic or topic is accurate. But also she refers to Kristen as her frontline editor. And like frontline editor is not a title. That's not a position that exists in publishing. You have developmental editors, you have copy editors, you have line editors. Like there's all kinds of different editors, but not a frontline editor. And just based on what those two words mean, I have to assume that Kristen Cast is a beta reader. But a beta reader doesn't sound as professional as frontline editor. Taken from the Q&A section of Loved. It's PC Cast responding to a fan question. She says, for the House of Night series, I do all of the writing and Kristen serves as my frontline editor. Early in the series, she made sure Zoe and the gang didn't sound like 40-something disgruntled school teachers. As the books progressed, the characters' voices became set, so Kristen shifted to being much more involved with plotting and brainstorming with me. I rely on her editorial advice completely. This is from the acknowledgements in Found. As always, big love and thanks go to Kristen for being the best frontline editor in the universe. Mommy baby. I don't know what that means. Also from Found, this is from the Q&A section of that book. PCcast says, remember, for the House of Night, Kristen is/was my frontline editor. We don't actually co-write the series. And then related to some weird like publishing stuff in terms of like her story about how things came to be and what the process looked like. Or I guess this isn't technically publishing, it's writing, her writing process. In all of the promotion for the Into the Mist duology, when people ask her what her inspiration for the series was, PC Cast goes on a long spiel. It's the same thing every time, but she talks about how she started writing the book in 2020 when, you know, there was lockdown because of COVID, and then she was also like, she just had surgery, plus there were all kinds of wildfires where she lives, so she was like stuck inside because of the smoke. And she like had been in a fire when she was a kid and is really scared of fire, so she was having like a lot of dread and fear and isolation and like really struggling. And she ended up writing Into the Mist as a way to cope and escape from the real world apocalypse by creating her own apocalypse.
I thought I would tell you first how this book came into being, because it's a fun story, but fun kind of verging on hysteria kind of fun story. In early spring 2020, when we were all dealing with the beginning of the horrible Rona apocalypse, and it was awful. I had just had surgery on my shoulder, then the Rona hit. So not only was I immune compromised from surgery, but it was the Rona, okay? I was so damn scared. And I had deadlines after deadlines after deadlines, as per normal. And I tried to write, and I couldn't. And a friend of mine in the business then, in the publishing business, said to me, I was like, I can't write, oh my God, what's going on? I don't know what I'm going to do. And she said, it's existential dread. And she said a lot of authors, a lot of creatives are having a big problem right now, trying to do anything that involves getting into that zone. So I was frustrated, though, by not being able to write, because I could almost always escape into my book worlds. So I thought about it for quite a while. And then I decided that I was going to do what I did when I wrote my very first book that was published, Divine by Mistake, originally published as Goddess by Mistake. And I wrote that book to escape a really horrible marriage. And so I kept sliding into the Divine by Mistake, into Partholon, into my fake world, my fictional world then. And I thought, you know what? If I can write the book, if I ignore my deadlines for a while, and I just write the book I most want to read right now, maybe I can snap out of this existential dread and I can really write. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try to do that. And then on top of the Rona, here in Portland, in the Pacific Northwest, in the summer of 2020, we had those horrible wildfires, and I am very afraid of fire. When I was in 4, my family was in a really bad fire. You guys can't really see it because I'm old now, but I have a scar here, and I have scars on my hands. You can't see this because I have tattoos on my hands, but I have scars from a fire. I was in a major fire. So I was terrified of the fire, of the Rona, and then the smoke enclosed Portland. And we literally couldn't go outside without like triple masking. And then it was like limit the time outside. So I was like, girl, you need to escape. I went down and I'm like, I'm going to write the book I most want to read. But that's how Into the Mist came into being.
And like, that's a great story. That's a really interesting, narrative of how this story came to be. It's also not true, because I wasn't looking for it. I was doing research for a different video I'm doing about feminism in the House of Night and also feminism in general across PC Cast's work. I just happened to be listening to this like interview she did, or like promotional thing she did, talking about, it wasn't Into the Mist, I think it was Found or something. So she was talking about a different thing she's working on. It wasn't Into the Mist, but she was teasing how she has another book that she's working on, and she said it's an apocalypse book. I started writing it before the Rona.
I'm doing it right now. I'm writing an apocalypse book that I started before our apocalypse. I started last year, and there's a big biological element in that.
So wasn't related to all that stuff. Now, I'm sure that that experience dealing with all of that stuff changed the book. I'm sure Into the Mist would have looked very differently if PC Cass didn't get caught and in, wildfire smoke and couldn't go outside. If she wasn't on lockdown from a pandemic, like, I'm sure it would have ended up being a very different book. But to say that she started writing the book after all those things and that was the catalyst, that was the inspiration, isn't true. Like, it's just not true, because there's an interview very early on where she's talking about working on this and says, I started writing it before all this happened. So she just lied. Like, that didn't happen. PC Cast has another series called Tales of a New World. It was, for a period of time, there was only 3 books of it released: Moonchosen, Sun Warrior, and Wind Rider. If you want to hear my thoughts on those, I have a whole video. I have an overview video on my YouTube about it, and then I have dedicated videos for each book on my Patreon. But in 2018, I think 2018, 2019, PC Cast had just finished Wind Rider and was supposed to start working on the 4th book, which as of then was untitled. And she had an accident, a horse riding accident, and was unable to write for a long time. And then she was trying to catch up on other contracts. And the 4th book fell off and was not part of her publication schedule. And then when people were asking about it, because originally she was just saying, I need to get caught up on my current projects and then I can work on that one. And then when fans were asking about it later, she was saying, well, I was never contracted for that. And I'm not going to write a book I'm not contracted for, because I'm not going to write for free. This is my job. I'm going to write a book I'm being paid for. And that was a thing that went on for many years. Like, it was 2018 when Wind Rider was released, and I think it was like 2023 or 2024 when Earth Called was finally actually published. So it was a long time before there was any traction with getting that book actually written and published. She did start writing the book without a contract and was just writing it in between other projects, but also she had her fans sign a petition petitioning her publisher to pick up the 4th book, that they wanted the series to finish. My publisher chooses release dates, and they do like to keep them fairly predictable so readers know when another is coming. The release for the 4th Tales of a New World should be this October, but I had an accident last year which pushed back my schedule. So right now, I don't have a release date for that book, but if you follow me on Facebook, you'll stay up to date. While you're waiting, check out The Disasters, the new series I've co-authored with my daughter. The 1st book releases Tuesday. Happy reading! So the full conversation is cut off, but basically what this commenter was asking is, like, they were under the impression that one of the Tales of a New World books, the last Tales of a New World book, was pushed back, and PC Cast is responding to that. What you probably heard was that my last year's House of Night Otherworld release, Forgotten, had to be pushed back because of that accident. Earthwalker can't be pushed back because I don't have a contract for it, but my accident did affect my writing schedule, though I'm back to 100% now. You can find details and an additional Wind Rider scene on my website. Hi guys, following the announcement of Sisters of Salem, the awesome new trilogy Kristen and I are writing together, which releases early 21, I've had a lot of questions about the book that follows Wind Rider in my Tales of a New World series. Well, I had an accident in November of 2018, which set me back many months. I'm okay now, and messed up my writing and release schedule. After I recovered and was/am ready to write the next book in the fantasy series, my publisher was more interested in new book ideas than publishing the last book in that series. Yes, it has upset me. Yes, I know it upsets you too. The bottom line with publishers is sales. So, if you want me to write the conclusion to Tales of a New World, the book that follows Wind Rider, Macmillan needs to understand that sales for that book would be good. The only way they'll know that is if fans get vocal. One fan has already started a petition. If you're interested, please sign. And no, it'll take well over 100 signatures to get the publisher to take notice. I'm more than ready to write the book, so here's hoping. Now, a lot of those things might seem like ultimately not a big deal. So she lied to promote her book. Whatever. Nobody is owed details about the actual events of her personal life. That's fair. That's fine. So she was inconsistent in her information about why a series didn't continue. Maybe it's a contractual thing. Maybe she's not allowed to share that. Sure, that's fine. But it all adds up to a pattern. And again, this isn't even an exhaustive list. This is just what I could think of off the top of my head while I ate breakfast today. So I think it makes the next part, which is the most relevant part, more questionable than it already is. So as I said, PC Cast has a bunch of House of Night related things coming up. In September, there's a re-release of the first 4 House of Night novels with new covers and corrected text to update it for modern sensibilities. Now, for those unfamiliar, the original House of Night books have copious use of ableist slurs, slut shaming, homophobic stuff, just a whole bunch of derogatory language in general, really offensive jokes, acceptable target mentality. I have essays about how harmful this series is. Many essays. I think I wrote like 7 or 8 of them. You should go check them out on my Medium. But there's a lot to unpack with how the original House of Night series was written. Also the spin-off series, but whatever. And so PC Cast is releasing updated versions of the books that remove all of that. She fixed it. It's gone. We don't have to worry about the books being offensive anymore. It's fine. You can read them leading up to the release of the movie and not be slapped in the face with, oh, this is like bad. But in the process of talking about that, PC Cast says some interesting things.
I do not and have not used the word retard in my vocabulary ever. But in 2005, the kids were calling themselves that a lot thanks to South Park. And so I used a lot of their vernacular. That is so fucking offensive today. I also did not do a good job of describing my characters of color. Mm-hmm. And I know better now that describing someone's skin like food is not a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm a much better writer now than I was then. And I know better now. And also, there was like, Zoe was, the stuff happening with Zoe and Aphrodite and the Nerd Herd, there was a lot of slut shaming going on very early in the books that sounded exactly like the kids around me. And I used it, and then by the time we got to the Benedictine Abbey and as they're escaping the House of Night, when Kelowna rises and all that kind of stuff, we start really having discussions between Aphrodite and Zoe especially about why Aphrodite was using sex to keep Eric and why she used sex in general. But it took 4 or 5 fucking books to get there. Yeah. So I started asking in 2016. No one said anything to me. And I've been very open about this on fan forums and everything. In 2016, I started petitioning Macmillan, would you please let me go back through these with sensitivity readers especially and update things. I won't change the characters. I don't change the plot. I just pull out the offensive stuff and put in better things. So finally, in 2022, they allowed me to do that. And quite frankly, they allowed me to do that because a foreign publisher didn't want to renew licensure because of the offensive words. So as usual with corporations, and that's what publishers are, corporations, it's all about money. So when it became about money, even though I've been asking since 2016, I had been asking to go back through those books. They finally let me, and I have worked my way now through Burned. I just finished Burned.
Okay.
That's where Zoe's shattered and she's in the other world. She's with the goddess.
So will we be able to buy those newer versions?
Yeah, the newer versions are all, if you buy brand new trade paperbacks, the newer versions are all in the first 4 for sure. I turned in Burned just a few weeks ago, so I don't know if that's updated yet. But they will eventually, if you buy the ebook versions, they update those more quickly. And also they've been re-recorded too. They're re-recording them, audios. They will all be done. Although I can tell you that after about book 6 or so, I purposely dropped a lot of the teenage vernacular because I was sick of it. And also because I don't use the word retard or skank or any of that. I just don't. And so a lot of that was washed out because they were busy saving the world. Okay.
Yeah.
They didn't have time for this other nonsense. But I have gone through, I'll go through all of them. And like I said, they're not going to be, the plot doesn't change. The characters are essentially who they were. They just are better. It's just better now.
Now, here's the thing. PCcast defended her use of slurs in the book multiple times in like 2019, maybe also 2020. So if she was petitioning for the right to change the text of the books and have them re-released with corrected text, why was she defending it? Okay, this one is an old one from Twitter, and it's a bit of a doozy, so just bear with me having to read the words that are written here. There are slurs. Kristen Cast and PC Cast's wording in Marked is starting to bother me slightly, with the use of the word retard multiple times and referring to a black woman as having good hair. I like the books otherwise. PC Cast. I began writing the series in 2005. It was important to me to use the vernacular teens were using to connect with them. It's now 2019, and much of those early books are outdated. If that bothers you so much you can't see beyond it, I understand and encourage you to stop reading. And the person says, I have a question. What exactly did you mean by good hair? PC says, it wasn't what I meant by it, it's what the character meant. I am not my characters. Again, if you can't look past the dated vernacular, then don't read the books. Easy peasy. And then the person says, so your characters have no reflection of who you were at the time? It's okay to just say, I've changed since then. And PC says, I already explained to you why I used the vernacular in the books. I've said it reflected teen speak well over a decade ago and that it is dated. That is the full explanation. Period. If you don't like it, don't read the books. This was from July of 2019. So, wanting the language changed and being against it in 2016 doesn't seem to fit this behavior. Also, she has used her platform to get fans to fight for things on her behalf before. She did it for a very long time with, first it was going to be a House of Night movie, then it was going to be a House of Night TV series, now it's back to being a House of Night movie. But especially for the original plan to have a House of Night movie, she spent years literally telling her fans to harass Samuel Hadida into creating a House of Night movie because he had the rights to it and he wasn't doing anything with them, which also belies a lack of understanding of how movie rights and production works. Someone can buy the rights to something and never use them. They're just buying the rights to them so that if anything is done with them, they are the one who gets to do it. It doesn't guarantee you're going to get a product. That's not how that works. Anyway, so this is taken from the Q&A section in Loved, which was published in, I believe, 2017. And it reads, Davis Films purchased the rights to House of Night. Kristen and I met with Hadida in Paris and had a lovely time discussing what was supposed to be the first of 5 major motion pictures. Hadida hired a fantastic screenwriter, Mark Hames, Kubo and the Two Strings. Mark wrote a wonderful screenplay that has my full support. Hadida has done nothing with it. There isn't anything more Kristen and I can do until the rights revert to us in 2020. Yes, we find this situation very frustrating. If you want to make your voice heard and tell Samuel Hadida you would like the House of Night to come to film or TV, here is his contact information. He's not listening to the authors. Maybe he'll listen to the fans. And then she gives his Twitter handle, his Facebook page, his email, and his mailing address. So, and this is just one example. She also did this in Lost. There were many social media posts about this. This went on for many years. I think 4 or 5 years of them regularly calling on fans to contact Samuel Hadida and that company to make the production, carry forward on the production of the House of Night movies. I also want to... I already arranged my clips for this video, so it didn't end up coming up in this section of the video, but earlier in the video, I also talked about that petition for Tales of a New World. So she did also call on fans for a publishing-related call to action to sign a petition to, push her publisher to give her a contract for the 4th book. So multiple examples of her using her platform and her fan base to fight with publishers or production companies or what have you to get what she wants from them. And so PCcast will absolutely call on her audience to, make a fuss, make a public stink about something that she wants done. So why didn't she have her fans petition the publishers to let her change the text of the book? If it's something she wanted, if it's something that there was, public backlash about, if it's something fans wanted, why didn't she push for that? Ever. It's also interesting because, I think the first corrected copy came out in late 2021. I think that's when the corrected version of Mark was released as an ebook, or the ebook was updated to be corrected, and there was nothing said about it, not a word anywhere. And the same happened with Betrayed and Chosen in 2022. They got updated, and nary a word. There were a few places where PCcast mentioned it, but they were pretty small. It was a couple little fan podcasts. It wasn't a big promotional push until now, although even now, not really. She's promoting the corrected copies being released, but she's not really promoting them as corrected copies. She's just promoting them as hey, a re-release of the series with new covers. She's not really promoting them in a way that acknowledges she did something wrong. And even in discussing the need to change the books, she's not taking responsibility for it, because as mentioned before, she's saying, well, the reason there's so much slut shaming, and the reason there's ableist slurs, and the reason that there's all this stuff happening that's really offensive is because that's how my teenagers talked. So I was just writing how teenagers talked. It's not my fault. I mean, she didn't say it's not my fault, but that's the tone of her defending it, or defending herself, if not the actual words she wrote. But the issue with that is, one, you are an author. You make decisions about every word you put on page. You definitely filtered out other things that your students said, because I have no doubt that a predominantly white school in Oklahoma probably had white boys trying to sound tough by calling each other the N-word, because I know that happened at my predominantly white school. So, and I was in school around the same time that the House of Night series was being released. You didn't put that stuff in there, but that's accurate to how teenagers speak. So you did make decisions filtering how much of what you put in. Also, it's not influenced by how the teenagers speak, because she put it in one of her adult romance novels. So this is from the epilogue of Goddess of Light, and I skimmed through the epilogue for some context, and apparently this character is a teenager, but it's in an adult book for an adult audience. And the way PCcast talked about her use of the R word, she implied that that was the thing that only happened in the House of Night series. It was only because she was writing in a teen voice for teenagers. So for this to appear in an adult book, I think is notable. But anyway, it says, getting up, she said, trying to stop herself from staring like a R word at his eyes. They were as blue as the ocean. She also, while talking about the process of correcting the books and stuff like that, she talked about how, it was a really big thing in the early books, all of this slut shaming and slurs and all this stuff, but it died off as the series went on and the characters kind of matured, and she was less concerned with writing all this teen speak. She still wrote a ton of teen speak. I don't know what she's talking about, but the later books have less of it in them, so there's less work to correct. She also talked about how she just turned in her corrections for Burned. Burned uses the R word 8 times. It has the most uses in the entire series. What are you talking about? And that's book 7. It's over halfway through the series. So no, it didn't die off as the series went on. It's used right up to the final book of the original series. Because I can remember Shaylin using it and being really confused about why this formerly disabled character is using ableist slurs. What are you doing, PCcast? Comment on a blog post on PCcast's old blog. The post was called Awesome Photo Shoot, and it was posted on April 15th of 2011. I'm going to do my best to censor the slurs in this post, but I still want it to be intelligible, so bear with me. From unknown user, my daughter was really interested in starting your House of Night series. I tried to read most of the books before I let her have a go at them. I was offended and a little surprised at the use of in your book marked. Needless to say, my daughter isn't going to be reading them, and I am working on getting the series removed from the district library. As adults, really, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Try checking out rword.org. PC Cast responds, Melissa, try checking out usconstitution.net. You have the right to decide for your family what they can and can't read. You do not have the right to decide for anyone else. But while you're busily trying to nullify a whole bunch of people's First Amendment rights because you don't like a word in a book you didn't even bother to finish reading, why don't you also petition your district to yank copies of To Kill a Mockingbird? N-word is a way more offensive word than R-word, and it's all over that book. Speaking of, you should also insist Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn be banned because there's definitely an offensive word used in there by children. Stick Shakespeare under your moral magnifying glass as well. I taught Romeo and Juliet to ninth graders for years, and I promise you there are seriously offensive words in that thing. Wow, that reminds me, Euripides' tragedy Medea, which I also taught, doesn't just have offensive words in it. Kids are actually killed by their mommy. Better ban that. My point, Melissa, is that once one person or a group of like-minded people decide that they have the right to choose for others what they read, think, say, write, it has no end. It's a shame you didn't finish reading my series or even that one book. My characters consistently deal with people who make snap judgments, and through situations that arise because of those faulty judgments, they learn to look deeper and use better sense. That's a good lesson for many people to learn. I'm going to try and read this big long quote without saying a whole bunch of slurs because it's full of slurs. Bear with me. The book's in my extremely attractive Anna Had a Joy catkin bag in the R-word bus. Aphrodite, stop saying R-word. Stevie Ray shouted at her. I swear you need to check out rword.com. Maybe you'd learn that some people get their feelings hurt by the R-word. Aphrodite blinked several times and then scrunched her forehead. A website? Seriously? Yes, Aphrodite. Like I have tried to tell you a bazillion times, using the R-word is demeaning and just plain mean. Aphrodite sucked in a deep breath and let it out in a rant. What about having a site for the C word, as in cunt, which demeans half of the world? Or wait, no, let's keep it the R word site, only make the R word rape, which is more than just hurt upper middle class mommies' feelings. Or, seriously, I stepped between them, we get it. Can we get back to Shaylin and the True Site issue? Yeah, whatever, Aphrodite said, flipping back her hair. Aphrodite's mean, Z, but she makes a good point, Aaron said. I glared at Shawnee, who only nodded enthusiastically, but didn't chime in. My head felt like it was going to explode. Ah, hell, I said, throwing my hands up in frustration. I can't remember what we were saying before the R-word part. Now, I want to talk about this post more because, and I know this is kind of getting away from what the core of the video was, but this is a point that I don't feel like this is something that can be overstated, the fact that PCcast is defending this stuff and like has a long history of defending this stuff. But I think this post, and especially in tandem with the quote from Destined, I think this really demonstrates that PCcast doesn't understand the point of people's complaints about her using this word and continues to not understand the point about people complaining about her using this word because, you know, currently she frames it as, well, it wasn't me, it was my characters, which is just dodging responsibility for choices she made in her own writing. But here, she's entirely dancing around the point of, you wrote in a contemporary novel with contemporary characters, people flippantly using slurs, especially for humor. And like, yes, I agree that the books shouldn't be banned because book banning is bad. But I think it's fair to say that, like, hey, you should probably read this educational resource about ableism and, like, learn why what you're doing is wrong. And PCcast completely dodged acknowledging that or taking any responsibility for her own education about disability rights and disability issues and, like, why ableism is harmful. And instead twisted it into a conversation about how, well, if this person doesn't like an ableist slur in a contemporary novel written by a contemporary author with contemporary characters, then clearly she must also be opposed to slurs and harmful language and harmful content in historical novels, some of which are centuries old, and therefore come from a time when English was borderline a different language. Like, Shakespearean English is really different from the English we use now. Like, it's not like reading a book from the 90s where characters use the F slur and the D slur to self-identify, and that was a common thing and a normal thing, and people being upset by that because it doesn't fit with modern sensibilities. Yes, that indeed would be a thing to be like, hey, actually, this is just how people talked at the time. Like, don't worry about it. Those were self-identifying labels. Instead, this is a word that is regarded as a slur. It was regarded as a slur when you wrote it. It's still regarded as a slur. It's been regarded as a slur for a long time. Please stop using it. And instead of taking onus for that and realizing she did wrong, PC Cast instead got viciously on the defensive and in the process completely misunderstood how language used in historical texts does not compare to the language she has used in a contemporary document. Interrupting editing Rachel to clarify, because I don't think I made my point super clear. The thing with the N-word being used in To Kill a Mockingbird is that, like, while I believe that language was still considered like derogatory or pejorative at the time, this is a historical novel. So the language that's going to be used is different, and part of the reason, or at least what should be part of the reason, these old books are used in classrooms is to help illustrate to students what things were like back then. It's as much about learning the story and analyzing narrative and symbolism, etc., as it is about learning from the past. When To Kill a Mockingbird was published, that's just how Black people were talked about. That is the language that was used. It wasn't good, but it was the language that was used. Where in House of Night, like, that came out in 2007. I can remember being in middle school in 2007, and we weren't allowed to say that word in school because it was offensive. People still did, but like, you weren't supposed to use that word. We understood that it was an offensive word. So it's not reflective of the language of the time in terms of this was just a super normal, common way to talk about people. The House of Night isn't set in like the 60s. So it was already offensive at that time, and it remains offensive. So that comparison between House of Night and the language in To Kill a Mockingbird doesn't hold. I just thought that was really, I thought it said a lot. Also in comparison to, the fact that this screed in the tone and like way that the argument is formatted sounds so similar to how Aphrodite defended herself in Destined, and like Destined was published after this altercation occurred in the comments on PCcast blog. What Aphrodite does in that conversation is she goes, oh, well, yeah, this word might hurt people with disabilities, but like, what about women? Aren't women important? And it's like, well, you realize that some women have disabilities, right? Like, you can be against ableism and sexism at the same time. But like, this is just PC Cast using her characters as a voice piece to defend herself to her readers in her own text, where the readers have no platform to argue with her. And so she just gets to frame herself as correct. And we know that she's framing herself as correct because Zoe agrees loosely with Aphrodite. Certainly, at the very least, she doesn't agree with Stevie Ray. And so it's framed as if saying slurs is fine because people are violent to women, and isn't that worse? And that's just like, again, the same as the way she responded to the comment on her blog. It demonstrates a complete lack of understanding of what the complaint actually is, and an absolute and total refusal to engage with that criticism and learn and make corrections in light of that. Also, jumping in again, because I thought more about the phrasing of Aphrodite's defense, and therefore PCcast's defense of the use of this language. I also want to highlight PCcast has said many, many times that she relates the most to Aphrodite, and Aphrodite shares her sense of humor. So the fact that Aphrodite constantly uses slurs as jokes says a lot. But anyway, she says, rape does more than hurt upper middle class mommy's feelings, which frames it as if the only reason anyone would complain about the use of slurs, specifically ableist slurs, in PCcast's work is because someone's mom read it and was upset. And that's the only impact it has. It just makes moms feel upset. Now, here's the thing. This argument seems to assume that anyone affected by an ableist slur, specifically an intellectually ableist slur, like the R word, must not be able to read or otherwise consume these stories on their own. One, audiobooks exist, so even if someone has an intellectual or cognitive disability that prevents them from reading, they can listen to audiobooks, or someone could read the book to them. Two, lots of people, like, there's such a wide spectrum of what is considered a intellectual disability or cognitive impairment, or like anything that would be considered under that header. Like, I'm pretty sure learning disabilities are generally considered to be a form of intellectual disability. So someone with dyslexia might have a hard time reading text on page, or they might be slower reading text on page, but they can still read. and they can still understand the words that are being directed towards them. Lots of people on the autism spectrum are considered intellectually disabled, or certainly targeted with intellectually disabled ableist language. I'm not sure if I'm phrasing that correctly, but ableist language that targets intellectual disabilities, like the R word, and they would be, that's the kind of language that would be thrown towards them. This is basically assuming that the people most affected by this word aren't the ones who would be reading this book and complaining about it. That just demonstrates a complete lack of understanding about what even is being discussed here and who is involved in this conversation. I don't know if PC Cast even realized that there was self-advocacy of intellectually disabled people speaking out against this word. And it just again, it looks really bad, and it says a lot about PC Cast's perspective, at least at the time that she was making these statements. And this was only in 2011. So, I know that's 15 years ago now, but PC Cast saying that in 2016, she was really firmly, petitioning her publisher to let her change this language. But it's okay, 5 years ago, you were vehemently defending it. And in 2020, you were also defending it on Twitter. And so it doesn't add up. And it just, there's an ongoing narrative of PC Cast not getting it and not actually taking ownership and not actually demonstrating that she's really learned why these things are a problem and who is affected and how you change that. Also, PC Cast saying that she's not ableist and she doesn't use ableist slurs. But in 2020, she said on Twitter, in reference to a tweet about Donald Trump, she called him a cognitively impaired narcissist, which is using the idea of intellectual disability and cognitive impairment as an insult, rather than just a condition that some actual human beings live with and should not be derided or insulted for or dehumanized for. So, the ableism is alive and well, dude. The fact that she could not only reread the series in preparation for the release of Loved, and then reread the series again as she's going through and correcting the text, and still claim that, oh, it's not a problem in the later books, it's just the first 3 or 4 books that's really a problem, is what are you talking about? You literally just read that book. You had to take those words out. What are you talking about? So it's an interesting way of spinning the actual existent text that anyone can go back and look at and see that she's lying. That's probably the biggest one. Overall, everything about the language use and her lack of ownership of it, and also her lack of an acknowledgement of just how big of a problem it was and how persistent of a problem it was. She's talking about oh, that was 2017 vernacular. It wasn't considered as offensive then, blah, blah, blah. And I'm I can remember 2007, dude. I can remember being told not to use that word in school. So, we knew that it wasn't a correct word to use. People still did, but, we knew it wasn't an okay word to use. But also, it was used in 2014. There was a book that released in 2014, the last book of the series. It still used the R word. So, it was definitely not as accepted then. There were whole commercial campaigns against it with... it was an actress from Glee. It was definitely, by that point, known that it's an offensive word to use. But she was still using it. Anyway, just a distinct lack of ability to own up to her own mistakes and responsibility and acknowledge that she did something not good. I'm also of the opinion that if you're going to correct a text, especially a book this old, this book is marked as almost 20 years old. So the decision to just... It feels like she's just trying to sweep it under the rug rather than properly acknowledge it. I honestly, I didn't want the stuff to be removed from the books because that doesn't really, some of the problems are so baked into the plot and world and characters that you just can't remove them. And so changing words isn't actually going to fix very much. I would have preferred that there be some kind of foreword added discussing and very earnestly, genuinely owning up to why this was done, why it's a problem, and the kinds of things that should be done differently going forward. That would have been way more meaningful than just I went in and I took out all the slurs. It's okay, well, you still put them there originally. Are we gonna And you're refusing to accept that that was your fault. Like, you are the one who made that decision. You made that judgment call. Not your kids in your classroom, you. I know this video is so long. I thought this would be a 30-minute video. It is so long. But I do want to also acknowledge PCcast. In that clip I included also talked about how, like, oh, the characters were calling each other sluts and skanks because, like, that's how kids in my classroom talked. And I would never use the word skank. But as you will see from these quotes and screenshots I'm about to share, that's not true. This is a response to a question on the House of Night Facebook, which PCcast runs. It's something about asking what Neferet would wear. And PCcast says, no, this is trampy. Neferet dresses like a silver screen movie star, not a hooker. Look at pics of Sophia Loren, Elizabeth Taylor, Marilyn Monroe, Grace Kelly, etc. She's sexy without being sleazy. If you Google silver screen era dresses, you'll see what I mean. From Facebook responding to a fan question, Neferet is classic elegance, not slutty. She dresses like Grace Kelly. I already described her old bedchamber in the early House of Night books. And again, a question from a fan about what Neferet would wear, and PCcast says, maybe, it's kinda slutty. So PCcast claiming that she only used slut-shaming and words like skank and slut in the House of Night because she was emulating how teenagers talked, just isn't true, because she responded to messages like that on Facebook in like 2018. You can see in this screenshot that the original question was sent at in 2018, and PCcast responded by using the word slut. So that's just how she talks and views things, is by describing certain outfits and behaviors by women as slutty, trampy, like a hooker, etc. One last thing I want to acknowledge, which is just like an annoying thing, it's not a big deal, but I think it's relevant in this whole big conversation, is PCcast, when people ask her, like, oh, but like, it's been so long that we've been waiting for some kind of movie or show to come out about the House of Night, like, is it actually going to happen? And she's like, yes, it's definitely happening. We're at this stage, and, you know, there's actors being hired, and we're getting towards production, and we have a film date and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, but that doesn't guarantee it's going to happen. Like, you should know by now something about how film and television production works, and that's that you are never guaranteed that it's actually going to release, because there's all kinds of reasons things can get stuck in pre-production, in production, in post-production. There are shows where a single episode has gotten released and then this show gets canceled. Like, you never know what is actually going to come out of this process. You never know what's, like, how far it's going to go. Even if the first movie does get released, there's no guarantee that the rest of the series will. So her, like, phrasing it as a guarantee, as a promise, just rings of her, again, like, it's almost like a willful ignorance. Like, she refuses to learn from what has happened before, because she's made these promises before. When the TV series was announced, she was like, yep, it's definitely happening. And then it didn't. So I don't know. I just think there's a lot of interesting patterns here. There's a unwillingness to learn from past experiences, past mistakes, as seen with everything about the production of a series or a movie about the House of Night series, as seen with her, just the way she talks about, as I went on for a long time, the harmful content in the original books, especially in light of the fact that, like, maybe like slurs aren't being used in the Otherworld series, but like the Otherworld series is still full of harmful content. It's got so much slut-shaming in it. This is a conversation between Zoe and other Kevin in Loved, the first House of Night Otherworld novel, just to demonstrate that the slut-shaming persisted. Zoe says, wait, is Twin a white girl from Tulsa? Blonde, real hot, and kind of slutty? That's her. Okay, that means you have fire and water. The slut's water? Somehow that makes sense. And, like, magical Native American bullshit. So, no, you didn't fix it. You just kept doing it. And also, like, just weird lack of clarity and transparency about various things going on with book releases and publication. A lack of transparency, which to me, as, like, I'm also a writer. I'm an indie writer, so I'm not dealing with all of the, you know, NDAs and whatever of the industry. But I do feel like if I had fans asking me questions about a book release, I would want to be as clear and honest with them as possible. And if details changed, I would tell them that it was a change, not pretend that that had been the story all along. And just like weird conduct, again, telling a fan they're not going to die of cancer is just a weird fucking choice, dude. Why would you do that? I wanted to talk about all that because I think it, especially with how much of a promotional push I know is going to happen going forward with everything going on with the House of Night series, especially the movie, I feel like, and if these other books she's talking about for like the spin-off and the companion books and whatever, if these do end up being released, I feel like there's going to be a really big push to cover up past issues in the series. And I don't think that is a responsible or mature response to her actual track record. And knowing, again, I'm going to cover some stuff in other videos, but knowing how many issues persist across how many books for how many years, there's a very real concern for me that PC Cast, like, she's hearing people make criticisms and complaints, but rather than actually properly taking it on board as a thing she needs to learn and she needs to correct, she's just seeing it as something she needs to cover up or dismiss, or like, I'm not sure the right word for it, but it doesn't feel like there's an earnest desire to acknowledge and grow from the issues of her past. I may, like, especially as more is coming out with the House of Night series related stuff, if I have more things like this to discuss, I might do another video. It also depends on like if there's more interest in it, and like if I'm doing research for other videos about House of Night and PC Cast, I might do, like, if I find other inconsistencies in that research, I might also do a video for that. But I just really wanted to talk about it somewhere because it's the kind of thing that I genuinely don't see people talk about. I genuinely don't know if anyone else has noticed these things. So I wanted to acknowledge it somewhere, and that's what I did. Anyway, that is enough of this video. I have talked more than long enough. Thank you so much for watching if you actually made it this far. Leave a... Ooh, what would be a good emoji? For some reason, I'm thinking the like shh emoji. Maybe because of the sense of like, hush, hush, let's not acknowledge that. So yeah, leave that emoji, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!